Hi. In chapter 10, wives like Sarah and husbands who honor them, in the book Recovering Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. This is Wayne Grudem's chapter on 1 Peter 3, 1-7. Last time we talked about what submission does not mean. This time we're in the section about what submission does mean. But here I'm going to read his comments about some troubling positions held by Gilbert Bilezikian, who we've had in quote before in the book. But I'm just going to read you some of his positions that Grudem presents here. One prominent approach is taken by Gilbert Bilezikian, hope I'm pronouncing that right, who attempts to deny the force of Sarah's example of obedience in two ways. One, he apparently takes Peter's statement as a joke, for he says, the use of Sarah as an example of obedience shows that Peter was not devoid of a sense of humor. In Genesis, Abraham is shown as obeying Sarah as often as Sarah obeyed Abraham. That was a direct quote from him. And he points to Genesis 16, verse 2 and 6, and chapter 21, verses 11 and 12. Bilezikian also denies that Sarah is a model for Christian wives to follow, for, and here's the quote, the point of Peter's reference to Sarah is that wives in the New Covenant can learn from their spiritual ancestress, who lived in the dark side of the Old Covenant compromise, when she had to obey her husband. Sarah obeyed Abraham, but Christian wives are never told to obey their husbands, neither here nor anywhere else in the Bible. End of his quote. These statements are very troubling. This is now Grudem speaking. 1. To say that a straightforward biblical statement is an example of humor is simply an easy way to avoid the force of a verse whose plain meaning contradicts one's position. But is this the kind of argument that reflects submission to Scripture? As for Abraham's obeying Sarah, Genesis 16:2 is a classic example of role reversal leading to disobedience to God. For this verse, Abraham gives in to Sarah's urging and has a son by Hagar. In Genesis 16:6, Abraham does not obey Sarah, but is clearly the family authority who again wrongfully gives in to Sarah's recriminations and allows her to mistreat Hagar and Ishmael. Why does Bilezikian refer to these examples of sin as positive examples of a husband's obeying his wife? To use such a procedure is to contradict the force of these passages. In Genesis 21, verses 11 and 12, God tells Abraham, listen to whatever Sarah tells you. But this was specifically with regard to casting out Hagar and Ishmael. It was not because of any general principle that husbands should obey their wives, but because of God's specific purpose for Isaac. For the verse continues, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. Abraham did what Sarah asked here, not because he was being an example of a husband obeying his wife, but because at this specific point God told him to do what Sarah said. God here used Sarah to convey his will to Abraham, but no pattern of husbands obeying their wives is established here. Readers should note carefully the result of Bilezikian's analysis of 1 Peter 3, 1-7, because at several points he ends up denying what the text does say and affirming an opposite concept that the text does not say. Peter says that wives should be submissive to their husbands, but Bilezikian says that the motivations for a Christian wife's behavior should have nothing in common with submission defined as obedience to authority. That was quoting Bilezikian. Peter does not say that husbands should be submissive to their wives, but Bilezikian says that husbands should be submissive to their wives and undergo a, and this is a quote, traumatic role reversal, whereby they bestow honor on their wives, much like a servant to his master. Peter says that Sarah obeyed Abraham, but Bilezikian emphasizes his own claim that Abraham obeyed Sarah. Peter says that wives should follow the example of Sarah, who obeyed her husband, but Bilezikian says that wives are nowhere told to be obedient to their husbands. We may well wonder if this can any longer be called simply a difference in interpretation of Scripture, or if it isn't rather a refusal to submit to the authority of Scripture at all, hidden under the smokescreen of alternative interpretations, which turn out on closer inspection to have no legitimate basis in actual data of the text. I'm going to link to a video called Why JWs Are a Cult, Scripture Not Final Authority. Watchtower changes the Bible to fit their doctrine. This is based on videos that David did from, I don't know how to pronounce his name now. It's a book called Four Major Cults. Holkema, I think is how you pronounce his name. Thank you for watching.